Welcome you all back to Trust All Truth. Today we are going to be talking about open-mindedness, and I have it as the second mark, Infinity 101, because that's what this class is going to be called. It's not based on anything that is out there. It's not taken from anyone's curriculum. This is something I've been working on for the past few years, and I'm finally going to start putting it out. I'm still working on everything, but I've got a decent amount out, and this is not the complete curriculum, this is not the complete program. This is introductory courses as marked by 101, but the mark in Infinity, it's been done and killed to the ground essentially. But this is showing the intention how to start off with. So teaching you how your mind works and how to accept new information. So this is what this first thing is. We're not going to get into the biology of it. We're just going to get into mostly the psychology of it. I'll get into the biology of it at separate times, but those are things that don't matter as much because they do matter as much, but they apply to everyone. So this is going to determine exactly how that information is received and translated and how you find it. So that wasn't very concise, but we'll get into it. So to start off, we have to understand what the purpose of open-mindedness is. So, let's define open-mindedness. Open-mindedness is, having an open mind means the willingness to know or acknowledge anything, not the willingness to accept everything. So, I have terrible handwriting, so I apologize to everyone. Willingness to know everything, not only accept. So this could be presented in a manner of ways. Usually, if we're talking about subjective things, and I'll put the definitions of certain keywords that, matter of fact, I'll put keywords over here. So, number one, subjective, and then something that goes along with that is objective. Alright, so in a subjective sense, open-mindedness would mean you take something, you see it. So if it's music, for example, I love using music as an example. You are willing to listen to something someone else has said. So if someone tells you, hey, this is good, listen to this. Hey, I really like this. Subjective, I really like this. You should take a listen to it. I think you would like it. And you can either choose to or choose not to say, choose or choose not to listen to it. But before then, you cannot say you like or dislike it. So that's being truly open-minded, and that's also being honest. So, I guess truth is in that, but truth is a whole nother subject that we'll get into, as well as subjectivities and objectivities. Trust, truth, all encompassed. So then you would go, if you were open-minded, you would then go and listen to this particular track or that they recommended to you. and then you would then determine your own subjective satisfaction from either you either enjoy it or you don't enjoy it, and you may report back or not. So willingness to do that and not accept it. So you not just saying, oh yeah, I like that sort of thing, even if it's in a genre that you would figure that you would like. Okay. So being open-minded and willingness to know and accept leads to a better understanding of reality. So the more things you are willing to know, the better, the more honest, the more truthful your view is, the more objective you can see things, or more objectively you can see things. So it gives you a better understanding of not only your reality, but the reality as other people see it. The third is Taylor's trust, so you have a better understanding of reality, so you now know it increases or can decrease your trust within other sources of information. It's very important with open-mindedness, with everything that you've thought you've already known, to stay consistent with open-mindedness. Anytime you are presented with anything that opposes your current view, it's very important to allow a challenge, right? And take that challenge to see if that's something you can correct. Allows for correction. Allows challenge / correction if deemed necessary, right? Like, ain't too proud, right? You can't, with a certain level of open-mindedness, pridefulness is destructive to this claim of your open-mindedness. Doesn't force, not forceful. So, if sensitive would include empathetic, but also convicted. Because that goes along with willingness to know or understand, which is empathy, and then not only accept, so that's convicted. And I put this purposely after correction, because you have to allow for correction. So before you stay convicted to something, you need to know after it's been challenged, right? Or before, you shouldn't be convicted to something before you allow the challenges to come through. Or if you do, are you convicted to something that has been challenged or not? Always be willingness to know what's up, allow challenging. So these are all at the same time. If you're not utilizing them and these are not in operation all at the same time, they're not only what open-mindedness is used for, they are also the instructions for open-mindedness in itself, because it's so expansive. So this first one, willingness to know, not only accept. What is another example? So subjective. So music. What else we got? Now this one's important. History is very important because there's two branches. There's subjective and then there's objective. Why is that? Why is history subjective and objective? This is due because these are both confined to time, record, and which then in turn creates credibility. So based on time and record, it determines how subjective and how objective these things are, which determines its credibility. When being open-minded with history, keeping in mind of all the instructions that we have to put in place. I don't have a linear way of teaching, like most people have. So what is a grand example of history? We've got that lends itself to time record. We've got science, language, music, religion, lifestyle. Which includes, we can have, to go deeper into it, we've got what is entailed within these things. We've got recipes or instructions within all these things. So we're going to come over here and go to say, let's go into something not so divisive. Recipes. Resources, measurements. Okay, let's list out the resources. So we got food, what's being used. We've got utensils. We've got method of preparation. If you're using an oven, if you're using water, what type of are you using cast iron? Are you using glass? Temperatures. The resources are going to be also location based. So location. So when we lend this information back to a recipe, we've got a certain amount of things. This is not a complete list. Obviously, there's things that go much further in depth into things of this nature, and this is not a cooking class. I'm just trying to relate this back to open-mindedness. So a recipe, and there's. In terms of what I'm using an example for, is when it relates to history, is in terms of an author. All these things have an author. If it's a cookbook, it has an author. It has certain ingredients in it, and it says it's from this certain place. It's got all these copyrights. It's got these publishing states and things of that nature, and it has certain resources or ingredients on it that are location based or weather based, so seasonal. Seasons also on there. Sometimes you could have throughout history, prior to global trade or a large amount of global trade in the way we see it today, lots of these things were seasonal. Lots of ingredients. They still are technically. They were even more. So we've got certain fruits that are only available from certain countries, and they will only get to certain places because of the, they didn't have refrigeration much. They had ice boxes. They obviously couldn't keep food hot unless you had a fire, and then there's a whole another thing with that. But transport, trade. So essentially what I'm talking about is credit. Who gets credit for these recipes? When we see someone's name on it, so credible, when we see someone's name on these things, or we see the ingredients used within it, how are we to, and we no longer have observable proof of it, this is history. How do we know where it came from. So a certain recipe, it would usually in the older cookbooks they would give, and this is what I like about some of those older books, and they would keep a pretty decent record and give credit to like a chef that's created, or where a chef got inspiration for using certain methods of cooking, or getting certain ingredients they wouldn't have thought to use, incorporating with other ingredients, right? So they would give credit to a particular person, and then maybe that person's ventures throughout the world, because these are recipes are international. They're much more global than most people think. Like origination of certain foods and things. And how do I trust that? I mean, I trust. How do you trust that? Because it was recorded for a purpose. So, something being recorded in the first place, an event being recorded in the first place, gives purpose. It gives reason, rather than someone giving you word of mouth. How much time has passed since it was written? And how many people are given? How many records of this original record are there? Right? And how many people have given, and how many times throughout history, how many instances is this seen on record, of course, prior or after the original record? So the things in the area, the resources that we have available of time and record, that's all we have to go on. So what lends itself to credibility is how much time has passed, the consistency in the records, from record to record and records of records. It lends itself very well to credibility. That's not the end-all be-all. Because there are major conspiracies. And those are some things we'll get into a little bit. So that's something I want to lay out as an example. Recipes, and in terms of credibility. Records, if consistent. So that gets into a whole nother area of how do you decipher between conspiratorial consistency and organic consistency. So conspiratorial, or I can say contrived, or let's say manufactured. So this is something I have heavily considered. And this is not really a lesson, this is our awareness at this point. This is something, open-mindedness is going to have you be able to make this determination. And how do you do this? Records, if consistent. So this consistency here is manufactured versus organic. So when we look at this line of consistency, we shall see what do we have to then look at. Everything is determined by a passage of time. Everything is bound. Everything in our natural universe is bound to the passage of time. Say, okay, so open-mindedness is like a magnet here. I drew the magnet as a spiral because during this passage of time we've already made our own revolutions, and there are certain things stuck on there. These things upon us. Let me change colors. Matter of fact, we put these things up along the way, and this is just a bit of an example. There's definitely certainly more. There's memories, there's behaviors that are attached, and it could even be a line, but it's a spiral because it starts small and gets big. So these come from both subjective. These are objective holdings. These are both objective, and they are at the same time subjective because they are individual to us. So there can be parts, I don't know if you can really see that, but inside a few of these holdings, even on the line itself, we have these subjectives. We have objectives. We have object thoughts, which are our baseline. They're our compass. They guide us so far. We pick them up along the way, and they're finite. They are countable if one chose to count them. Many people do not. Many people do not quantify their beliefs, which is fine. In fact, we have much more in these so the green is to represent subjective, and the white represents objective. It is my subjective thought through subjective observation, through objective study, without an expectation for an answer, due to my open-mindedness, I've come to the conclusion, or not concluding because I'm open-minded, to hearing something different, that we have many more subjective holdings than we do objective. And what are these subjective holdings mainly comprised of or influenced by? Emotion. Heavily. And this, and even here, we have emotion, which if not controlled is dangerous. Very dangerous. We'll get into that. Not today. Also on this line, we have these are opportunities these are open paths. So this is what I consider, this is what I am originally was going to use it as a point of rejection. So opportunities you have along the way, although you have this opportunity the whole time. Some people, I'll even put it in here. But at At all times, this line of opportunity is available. But these lines that I've put here are instances which you decide to either accept or reject a new subjective thought or objective holding. Subjective holding or objective holding. And we understand that they can be all at the same time, separated. But we have more subjective than we do objective. Because objective requires experience. And we have more thoughts than we ever have experience. Even a thought itself is an experience. But in terms of things that can potentially affect other people, we have these objectives or choices that could potentially affect other people. And we have many more thoughts than we do opportunities for our choices to affect other people, which are heavily influenced by our subjective thoughts. You can separate them. So in these, with the ones that are separated, sure, you're fine. But the ones that are together, if you're not in control of this subjective reasoning, then that's a potentially dangerous place. Very dangerous. Because then that takes away, that crosses off your willingness to accept or willingness to be challenged, your allowance of a challenge due to an emotion, something subjective that you hold over object. And sometimes you'll even abandon your own right. It influences your objective, so that's abandonment of what you hold to be true anyway. All these instances of subjective thought are going to influence how you will think objectively. So I used the example of a recipe because that is quite inconsequential. If you use the wrong ingredients, you may just waste some stuff, and maybe depending on the type of person you are, do you waste food? Is that something going to hurt you? Do you have more to use thereafter? Did you burn something? And the fact that you took the recipe into consideration to begin with shows that you were risking something. So there's always inherent risk in anything that you need to learn more about. Anything that you do not know, there is inherent risk in taking into believing something. Because you have an idea, and people will keep saying it's subjective, of what the result you want. So if you do not get that result, it's something unexpected. And that was the risk you took. But what does the result affect? What is the consequence of that result, of the action? Does it matter? Are you hurt? Physically, emotionally, and emotionally. Viewable, quantifiable, calculatable, measurable. Can't be calculated or measured, other than with more subjectivity. So the length of this we at all times have this line of opportunity. These lines that cut through are instances where you chose to accept or reject. And that may be a good thing. You're still alive. So this is just, I didn't make it bigger. So these things, because I did not specify, or because this is it's actually a very good diagram, but it's much too simple. But the beginning of your life, none of these here. This middle circle is the circle of birth, so indoctrination. So you don't really hold anything. I mean, that's not true, but you're not open-minded at that age. You're accepting of everything. So, of anything and everything. And that's up to a certain age of maturity, which is scalable. That's different for lots of people. So when your consciousness comes in, it determines your standard and your level of open-mindedness. If we come back, let's see, we're playing into organic. All right. What we'll have to get into next is something that, or not next, but in one of the videos later, in terms of open-mindedness, which is very important, which will determine how readily willing you are to being open-minded, is your own and environment. When we connect these back, actually, this is actually very important. So when we use all this put together to determine what the accuracy of history is, we have to consider all of this for every person, for every instance for everyone that is involved with this information. So if we see what they held objectively true, what they held subjectively true, and then we compare the information that was passed, we see the results of the information when other people has used this information. We have to consider this because this is what we consist of. Everyone else has a different organization of these same elements. And if we don't consider that, the differences as well as the similarities, we are not fully being open-minded, and we have an inaccurate thought and capacity to understand reality. So this here is infinite, which is red, infinite opportunity. Infinite opportunity. Now, because we can identify these specific elements in the makeup, when we go back to investigate, we don't have to try to identify those. All we have to do, we have much less work to do, because after we identify these elements, due to our own open-mindedness to understand these elements, all we have to do is understand what they are and where they lie. Because these holdings, these opportunities of rejection and acceptance, the recording of those things is imperative, because the way we present ourselves is based on the newest thing. After the newest rejection or acceptance. Some of these things no longer hold true from our past. But because we are ourselves, we know that. The people on the outside looking in, without record of it, without us telling this, they do not know, because they are only able to see us physically, objectively. So we as a whole, when we're observing someone else, as much as we observe the inside fully, we observe their inside fully subjectively, but we see their outside fully objectively. So and this is because we are not them. And because this is a beautiful thing. This is actually a beautiful representation. You may consider this, and people often consider, why isn't that confusion? No. Uncertainty and confusion are not the same thing. Okay? So there's a uncertainty and confusion. That is another lesson. We can't get into that today. When we look back to identify these things, when we're looking back to identify these records of history, considering this of all people. So I don't know where all my chocolate, to be honest. It just disappeared. And I mean, that's perfectly alright if that is purely the case. That's alright. Open-minded requires vigilance. Indoctrination, acceptance of things that you are not considering, keep in mind. Open-mindedness, acceptance without considerance, is not fully open-mindedness. It's a level of open-mindedness that is not constructive. That is not as beneficial, as constructive, as beneficial as it could be. So, requires vigilance. You have to be vigilant. Alright? So that's what we're going to leave off for today. Leave any questions below. This unit is far expansive. This includes everything in existence and eternity. But we do have a few choice topics that we'll be referring to in the next videos coming up. Appreciate you all for watching. Be blessed, stay blessed, and I'll see you all in the next one. TrustAllTruth.org is coming soon. TrustAllTruth.com to donate, so I can more readily make these videos, and we can have more teachers, instructors, more informers available to you. Alright, thank you, be blessed, stay blessed, I'll see you all.